Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and welcome to part 4 of our exploration of Asian horror films released in 2018. This is the final part of this video, which means that we have reached my personal favorite Asian horror movies from this particular year. We have a whopping 10 movies that we will be covering tonight. The availability for most of these titles is actually pretty good, but the last few are unfortunately a bit difficult to find. By the way, I already have a full-length review for most of the films that we're talking about tonight, and those full-length reviews are available on my channel. So if you want some additional thoughts on any of these, just search the titles on my YouTube channel. And as always, titles for all the movies I discuss are listed in the description box below. So let's get rolling here. We travel to the Philippines first, and that is Aurora, a Filipino horror. The passenger ship Aurora mysteriously collides into the rocky sea, threatening an entire island. A young woman and her sister both survive by finding the missing bodies for a bounty. Early on, we see the nearby community as they decide to stop searching for survivors to the shipwreck. And this is an emotionally traumatic event for the community because family members perished in the accident. So a few people propose to look out for dead bodies they may come near the shore. Unfortunately, the spirits of the dead may have returned as well. Now this stars Ann Curtis, who was also in Buy Bust, which I reviewed a few years back, and it was directed by Yam Laranis, who directed The Road and The Echo. So this director has made some good movies in the past, good horror movies. Now this has a nice opening, begins beneath the sea and rises above it, approaching the land. There is some pretty cool imagery here involving a giant shipwreck. I enjoyed that. The film just looks good overall. Color scheme is on the gray side, which kind of matches the rocky shores and the waves that crash into it, as well as the ship and the rainy weather. It reminded me a little bit of Dementia from 2014 because there are rocks everywhere. Also, lots of crashing waves and ocean shots. For someone like me who does not live near the sea, this movie impacted me on a sensory level because I'm just not used to crashing waves and stuff like that. So I liked it. Even from a natural standpoint, I find the environments rather unnerving. Score and sound design are quite good. Story and characters are a bit simplistic. I mean, we do learn a bit more regarding the people who are on the boat, which is kind of interesting. One character in particular. And this does feel a little bit like an art house horror flick. Does not rely on like visceral scares, but it lays on atmosphere instead. Probably a bit too slow paced for some viewers, and many English language reviewers dislike this. But it was still a box office hit in its home country, and there's definitely a craftsmanship here that is commendable. This is probably the lowest rated film we'll be covering tonight, but I enjoyed it enough to include it in part 4 here. So this is pretty spooky stuff, avoids jump scares, which I prefer. Lots of water-related imagery, as you might imagine, and the ghouls do look pretty good. Finale relies on invoking sadness over fear, but it works well, and it's a bit different. So I enjoyed this, and I definitely recommend it. This is on Netflix. Very easy to find. Now the next film here, maybe a little bit more of a crowd pleaser, and we're going to Japan for Violator. Yes. The following plot synopsis is taken from It's Bloggin' Evil. Desperate to track down her sister Naomi, who becomes involved in an online social media forum about mass suicide, a woman's investigation leads her on a train ride to a small village on the outskirts of the city. There she meets Red Sheep, an internet handle for the mass suicide forum greeter for those individuals seeking to give up their life willingly. She goes to an abandoned house where congregated patrons of their own demise wait for forum members from all over to gather before stepping into the afterlife. Now, the first interesting observation is that this film is from the director of Meatball Machine. So if you're a fan of that film, it gives you a reason to watch this one. They are quite different, though. The opening half hour has quite a bit of setup, but it's quite intriguing because you're wondering what's going to happen. You add in some weirdo villagers, and the outcome is quite uncertain here. where is this movie going? Is it going to be a torture flick? Is it going to be a creepy suicide flick? I wasn't really sure early on. I will say this, though. It's not the smoothest narrative experience. The story is pretty easy to follow, but it's more of like a low-budget, slightly disturbing journey into like exaggerated, degenerate human behavior. I'm trying to be as vague as possible. Quite enjoyable to watch, though, because it has a different feel to it. On the other hand, if you're expecting an expertly crafted script and character development, you may be disappointed. The acting is a bit over the top, but it has a backwoods hillbilly vibe to it, which I generally don't like, but it just fits the movie so well, and it works better than usual because these folks are not overtly obnoxious all of the time, like you might see in a Rob Zombie film, right? In terms of scares, I think Violator definitely delivers. It's quite demented and violent at times. The horror elements are effective in a low-budget kind of way, and as you might expect, things spiral into mortal danger. Visually, it's decently shot, with a few striking moments involving sunlight in the forest, and it's only 1 hour and 12 minutes long. So, if you like the director, you like more like low-budget, violent horror movies, I say check this one out. I watched it twice over the past few months, and I can see myself watching it again. Availability on this one, it's on Amazon and YouTube. There's also a physical media release. I think it's available on DVD as well. All right, we're sticking with Japan here for the next title. It's another really interesting one here, and that is Ghost Mask Scar, a horror drama hybrid. The following plot synopsis is from the website JB Spins. Miyu has come from Japan to South Korea to find her sister, but it's unclear whether she wants to be found. The older sibling was always overshadowed by Miyu and Sei, the youngest, but a terrible misunderstanding brought her resentments to a boil. It is indeed significant. She is never given a proper name. Miyu only refers to her as my sister or sis. Initially, Miyu finds the city of Seoul to be an expensive and inhospitable place, but she seemingly catches a break when she meets Hana, a plastic surgeon. Forging a fast relationship, Hana invites Miyu to stay with her and her lover, Hyo-jin. Now, this film is mostly a dark drama for much of the opening hour, with a few brief, spooky moments thrown in. Perhaps a bit slow in terms of pacing, but the character interaction and development are quite good. We quickly find out that there's some bad blood between these sisters. And this is a female-led movie with almost no male characters in it at all. There's like a small role from some random guy. But pretty interesting that it's so female-led. There are a few coincidences and contrivances mixed in, mostly involving people who kind of meet each other by chance in a big city, but it's not that big of a deal. I enjoy the story. Script also touches upon some topics that we've seen before in Japanese and Korean movies, namely plastic surgery. And while watching the film, you can kind of expect certain things to happen in terms of plot lines, and they do kind of happen, but they're like core to the film's themes. They're not thrown in as like a shocking twist or anything. They just kind of happen, and I like that because a few of the earlier moments are a bit predictable, and they play it as like a core theme instead of trying to like shock you with it, which was the right choice. On the other hand, I was genuinely surprised at certain points as well. The finale references something, I'll keep it vague, that I was not expecting at all, and was pretty darn cool. They actually do reference it in the trailer, though, which I did not watch until after I saw the movie. So I would say don't watch the trailer and just go in blind with this one, because the ending, if you're familiar with certain things in Japanese film, you might be pleasantly surprised. Another positive is that the horror does fly in pretty strong during the final third. It's effective because of the dramatic foundations that precede it, and they use a mix of practical and CGI effects. Again, I'm not a big fan of CGI effects. Especially in a movie like this, it's unnecessary, but again, kind of a minor gripe. Nicely shot, only 1 hour and 20 minutes long. So Japan comes through with 2 films in a row here that are under 80 minutes in length. I mean, you just gotta love it. You gotta love it. You can watch these two with a double feature real easy in one evening. So I definitely recommend Ghost Mask Scar. It's available on Amazon streaming. So this one definitely, I was very happy to see that this showed up on Amazon because I've been looking forward to it for a number of years after I read some reviews. And it's a good flick. Alright, let's skip to a different country here. Let's go to Indonesia for the next one. And this one, a lot of people have heard of, from a big-time director, and this is a good one. May the Devil Take You. Of course, 2018 from Indonesia. The film begins with a cool witchcraft spellcasting ceremony, which I'm always happy to see. An old man, played by the guy who was the villain in the Raid Redemption, hires a creepy woman to perform these rites. She uses someone's hair as part of the ritual. Then, we see a montage during the opening credits that explains the rise and fall of this old man's success and financial status. I mean, what do you expect when you're dealing with like a witch? Afterward, we are introduced to our protagonist, who is played by Chelsea Islan. You may remember Chelsea from the Mo Brothers actioner Headshot, and in some ways, she's put through the ringer even more in May the Devil Take You. This was, of course, directed by Timo. Now, let's rattle off some positives here. The family residence is an unnerving location. This is not your typical old house. It has some dust lying around, but it's still perfectly livable, you know? No, it's not like that at all. This place looks old and nasty. This place is pretty nasty. Music is pretty sweet, uses a combination of ambient sounds and synth. Lighting is effective, some good use of orange, yellow, and red during the later parts of the film. The acting is good overall. Like, I do like Chelsea. I think she does a good job of expressing emotion. Very good job, actually. So seeing her in another movie is always nice. I like her. In regard to the scares, the filmmakers go for visceral, moderately revolting horror, I would say. It blends in some creeps, some graphic violence, and some bodily fluids, I guess. Some of the scare tactics reminded me of a particular horror flick from back in the day, which I will not mention, although you could probably guess which one. But this adds some variety to the scares that I appreciated, and they saved the best stuff for the final half hour. There are a few jump scares in this, but they're mostly limited. The film relies more on ghastly imagery and blood. In terms of negatives, I think the script writing has some problems during the middle section. It's just like a little bit clunky in how the characters react to this horrific situation. But the final third kind of brings it back together, and things are more fluid, and they create a more logical momentum for the finale, I think, during the latter act. So it corrects itself. Definitely a fun and intense flick, regardless of its flaws. So yeah, if you're a fan of the Mo Brothers or Indonesian horror, you basically have to watch May the Devil Take You. I think it delivers. This is on Netflix streaming. Alright, next, we're going to visit Korea. And we got 3 in a row from Korea coming up here. Alright, and they're all very different movies, actually. The first of which was actually a little bit surprising. It was better than I was anticipating, and that is Rampant. This is a horror-action hybrid. Set hundreds of years in the past, some dude gets bitten on a ship by a zombie and then murders his wife and child. You know, and they call it like the plague or demonism, but it's really a zombie. As you might expect, this evil condition spreads among the populace. Meanwhile, Hyo-jin stars as a prince who lives in China, but returns to Korea after the suicide of his brother, who went against his father. He encounters a group of assassins on his way there who help him survive an attack by the zombies. However, they're located quite a bit away from the capital and must make a trip to the royal palace to request military support to take down the undead. Yeah, Hyo-jin is a good leading man who's been in some memorable stuff over the years. Some of my favorite movies with him were Late Autumn, Come Rain, Come Shine, Confidential Assignment, and The Point Men. He's also been in some hugely popular K-dramas, My Lovely Samsoon and Secret Garden being 2. His character in Rampant is quite selfish at the start of the movie. He has no concern for his home country. He wants to rectifies some personal problems, and just go back to China. But he gets wrapped up in local conflicts as well as the zombie outbreak. Quite a badass character, though. Can use his sword very well. There's some good human conflict in this involving Hyun-bin and the head of the military, played by Jang Dong-gun. He plays a good bad guy in this. Tough to take down. You always want your bad guy to be tough to take down, and this guy, he is. He steps up to Hyun-bin early on and starts talking smack to him, which escalates the human conflict, which makes the movie interesting. It feels like the zombie threat is intermingled with the human threat that could be worse, and that always makes things good, right? Typical for a zombie movie, though. But similar in some ways to Monstrum, which I covered in the last part of this video, but I actually prefer Rampant over Monstrum, primarily because this movie has a little bit more oomph to it. It feels a little bit more higher octane, as I like to say, and this is especially true during the action scenes and the fights. And the period setting is always interesting for a zombie flick, because the humans are lacking modern technology. They have to use swords, arrows, and very limited firearms. We get a good amount of zombie attacks in this film. It's pretty nicely paced. The second half, really, is just, there's a lot of attacks. There's a cool suspense scene, takes place inside of an old prison with tons of zombies crashing in. They're trying to break into the prison. They're trying to break out of their cells because they turned into zombies while they were in there. And the good guys are trying to find their way out. So that was a good scene. The fighting uses some variety, especially near the end when Hyun-bin breaks out some cool moves. And the finale is lengthy and totally satisfying. I enjoy this one. I strongly recommend it. It's just a good crowd pleaser that I think most people are going to enjoy. It might not be as awesome as the Kingdom TV series, but it's quite good. It's available on Tubi, Amazon, and YouTube. All right, we shift gears. We stay in South Korea, but we shift gears to a completely different type of movie here, and that is Door Lock. This is a horror thriller hybrid. A woman, played by Hyo-jin, is scared that she is being stalked by someone in her apartment building, and she suspects that this person is attempting to break into her house or her residence. One night, she wakes up to hear someone at her front door turning the handle. She calls the cops, but since she cannot identify this person, there's really little they can do at this point. And as you might guess, this situation becomes progressively more disturbing. Now, this is actually a remake of the Spanish film Sleep Tight. I've seen that movie, and I really enjoyed it, actually. That film is somewhat unorthodox because the main character is the stalker, and you follow him throughout the film as he does various things to people in his apartment complex for the sole purpose of making them miserable. It's actually quite entertaining. I definitely recommend that film if you haven't seen it. Now, Door Lock, on the other hand, reconstructs the story to be from the perspective of the victim, not the stalker. So you could actually watch both films. They're both very good, and you get kind of a different experience, which is cool. There are some legitimately creepy scenes in this movie. It's one of those films that makes you paranoid when you're home alone. You're watching the film, and it's like, man, is someone trying to break into this person's house? Is someone already inside? You get that feeling of anxiety while you watch it. Very effective in that way. I know this is a remake of Sleep Tight, as I said, but it kind of reminded me also of a different Spanish film called The Uninvited Guest from 2004, another very good film to check out. But yeah, in terms of creep factor, Door Lock is just as good as those Spanish flicks. It takes its time, it's got slow burn tension, introduces a few acts of violence that are disturbing, but the ending has a sequence that is extremely claustrophobic and intense. Definitely provides a nice crescendo, very satisfying. Hyo-jin, great in the lead role. She's a fantastic actress, no surprise. Yeah, so again, another one, strongly recommend it. I think most people would enjoy this. Very easy recommendation. Easiest way to find it is on Daily Motion, and it does have subtitles. All right, our final one from Korea tonight. Completely different movie. And this one's could be the most popular Korean horror film from 2018. It's probably one you've heard of, and that is Gonjiam, Haunted Asylum. This is just a straight-up documentary-style horror flick. The film begins with two young men who are recording their exploration of the abandoned Gonjiam Psychiatric Hospital. The two head to room 402, the intensive care unit, which no one has opened in years. They try to open the door, but their broadcast abruptly ends. After seeing news of the teenager's disappearance, Hyo-jin, the owner of a YouTube channel, decides to explore the building with his own team. They do a live broadcast of their exploration of the hospital with the goal of reaching 1 million viewers. So this is, as I said, documentary-style horror, which we've seen a million times before, but this is just very well executed. Does a good job of using the appropriate cameras. Some people could get real annoyed when documentary-style films don't use correct camera angles, or the people keep filming stuff when they're in mortal danger. Don't have to worry about that here. The cameras are strapped to the characters and are always on. So you never have to ask yourself, dude, drop the camera and run, because, the cameras are strapped to them, So that's a good idea, and it eliminates some plot holes and dumb character decision-making, which is good. Camera work and editing are good. Not too much shaky cam. You could usually see very clearly what's happening. Lighting was just enough to show the things that lurked in the shadows. That's half the battle when making films like this, and this one does a good job at basically everything there. First few minutes have kind of an obnoxious character. Thankfully, they disappear very quickly. After that, our main band of characters are likable enough. Maybe a bit too wild and energetic, but they're fine. But the actors did do a very good job of expressing terror with their facial expressions. Like, they look terrified in this, and that definitely adds to the experience. I did like the performances. There are a few jump scares here and there, but not enough to be a serious problem. For most of its runtime, this is simply just a very kind of good and scary movie with some creepy moments. There's one scene that legitimately freaked me out near the end, and it's a long one. And it shows that the filmmakers had great patience in executing it, and it's definitely, it could be the scariest scene of any Asian horror film in this year. So yeah, and the decrepit hospital environment always works. So yeah, this could be the scariest Asian horror film of 2018, and it's very entertaining. In terms of availability, widely available. It's on Tubi, Amazon, YouTube, Blu-ray, DVD, easy to find, and you should definitely check it out. All right, we return to Indonesia in our top 3. So, what do we got here? Indonesia comes back, and this one is more obscure, but it definitely delivers, and that is Kafir, A Deal with the Devil. All right. A family living in harmony suddenly experiences an unexpected tragedy. One night after dinner, the father reacts to a sharp pain. Before he dies, he spits out a piece of glass. And after that, the mother begins to behave strangely and often sees terrifying visions. Then, someone in their village suddenly dies mysteriously and his house burns down. So, what's going on here? You know what I mean? But the adult kids won't let their mother suffer the same fate as their father, and they need to find out what's happening and stop it before it's too late. Now, there are a few cheap jump scares early on, but those drop off fairly quickly. The horror has a nice overall feel of quality to it, in terms of production values, filmmaking, etc. It definitely creates a creepy atmosphere, and the music is eerie as well. The spooky scenes look like they're leaning towards a supernatural, ghostly direction at first, but then it kind of mixes things up along the way. As the film rolls along, you might think it's heading in a different direction. So it ebbs and flows between some different styles of horror. I don't want to tell you specifically what, because it might spoil things, but by the 30-minute mark, if you've seen your fair share of Asian horror movies, you may have an idea where this is headed. I enjoyed the lighting in the house early on. It has a sickly orange hue to it. Always been a fan of that shaded color. Get some yellows and reds as well. Quite a bit happens in this film. I mean, it's pretty densely packed, which is why I rated it so highly in this year. It just, by the midpoint, it almost seems like the problem is on the verge of being rectified. It moves like so efficiently. And then the intensity continues to ramp up quite significantly after that point with some pretty crazy moments of horror. It's definitely delivers. The last few movies, Gonjiam and this one, they're representative of like really intense, scary Asian horror movies. And I don't always recommend stuff like that. A lot of my favorites maybe aren't the scariest, but they're like really interesting or creepy or like depressing or whatever. But yeah, some of the films tonight definitely have their scares locked down, and that's a selling point. Performances are very good, just like I said, very good quality flick. A little bit of CGI used for fire, but minor gripe. So if you're just looking for like a really solid quality Indonesian horror flick from this year, Kafir, A Deal with the Devil is a good choice. Now this film is available on Daily Motion, and I think it has subtitles. I could be wrong though. All right, we're in our top 2, folks, and Japan takes both slots. It just kind of happens for me. This is just the way I feel about things. A very common occurrence in this playlist. So the first one is nuts. It's a nuts movie, and that is Liverleaf. Now the story here revolves around a relatively small group of students in a school that will be closed after they graduate in the next few months. Our protagonist is a girl by the name of Haruka, who endures some vicious bullying from her classmates. Teachers don't seem to care about it, so her parents recommend that she leave the school entirely. Unfortunately, that does not solve the problem. As a viewer, you know something bad is going to happen, and it does. And after that pivotal event, there are violent repercussions. I'm very glad that Japan made a film like this in 2018. If you watch the earlier videos in this Asian horror playlist, you might remember that I covered a good number of violent Japanese exploitation films from the 1990s. You have like the All Night Long trilogy and all kinds of stuff. Now, Liverleaf is not as disgusting or grimy as some of those films, but it does have certain similarities. The theme of bullying is present. The violence involves youths and teenagers. All of the actors are teenagers in real life. And the presentation will create a divisive reaction from viewers. However, I do believe that Liverleaf is actually more entertaining than many of those other Japanese horror films from the 1990s because it plays with its tone a bit more, creates something that's rather hard to explain but more interesting to think about. So the violence is sufficiently bloody for fans of horror films, but it's presented in multiple tones. Sometimes it's mean-spirited, sometimes it's conventional, and sometimes it's exaggerated and blackly humorous. Now, I'm a huge fan of this director, Eisuke Naito, who I think is one of the more talented horror directors that has emerged in the past decade. One of his best films is a film called Puzzle from 2014. He definitely infuses some black humor into his movies, and it's quite effective because it's not like low-hanging fruit black horror. It's like kind of infused into certain scenes, and it'll catch you by surprise sometimes. So, yeah, I really like this guy's style. Liverleaf does a good job of establishing a sense of unease as well during the quieter moments. There's a sense of danger present throughout much of the film, even when it's not immediate. And the entire film is set during the snowy months, which adds quite a bit of atmosphere because the color of white is accentuated, and of course the redness of blood is more pronounced by the constant presence of white snow. So there's some really cool visuals in this in terms of, horror. See, this is the type of film that kind of excites me as a moviegoer and a viewer of Japanese cinema. Despite any flaws you may find in this movie's kind of lodged itself in my brain. It's just a little bit different, and the director's really talented. And I definitely recommend this if you want something a little bit different and very entertaining. Now, Liverleaf, unfortunately, has the worst availability. Oh, no, actually, it's not available on physical media at all, but it's currently on YouTube, and it was just uploaded a few weeks ago with English subs. So if you want to watch this movie watch it right after this video is done, okay? Just type in Liverleaf on YouTube and check it out, okay? That should be a high priority for you, because who knows how long it's going to be on YouTube. This director's films have gotten very poor distribution. If you've seen my video, Where Have All the Japanese Horror Films Gone, or whatever, where are they nowadays? Definitely check out that video. I think I mentioned this director specifically in that video. But yeah, check it out. And my personal favorite Asian horror film from 2018 comes from Japan, of course, and that is It Comes, also known as Kuru. The story begins with Hideki, played by Satoshi Sumabuki, who marries Kana, played by Haru Kuroki, and he moves into his new suburban flat. 2 years later, their house is attacked by a sinister presence that seems to be targeting their younger daughter. To protect his family, Hideki asks for help from a journalist, Nozaki, played by Junichi Okada, and his psychic girlfriend, Makoto, played by Nana Komatsu, who performs a ritual to break an unknown spell, but they come to learn that this entity is beyond their imagination. Now, if you're familiar with any of these actors, this is a pretty fantastic cast, all right? I am a huge fan of some of these actors. And it also includes Takako Matsu, who shows up later. And it was directed by Tetsuya Nakashima, who's one of the best Japanese directors around nowadays. He gave us Confessions from 2010 and World of Kaneko for 2014. And anytime this guy comes out with a movie, it's like an event. And I don't think he's made a movie since. It's been like, 6, 7 years? You know, come on, dude, or 5 years, I guess. Dude's got to come out with something. In any case, you know, I was stoked for this movie, and it became my personal favorite Asian horror movie from this year. Now, the plot synopsis doesn't seem like anything special. It's like, oh, what is this? It's a typical ghost movie or exorcism film or whatever. But it's the director and the cast that make it special. That's immediately evident during the pretty awesome and crazy opening credits, which use a montage of images. So within the opening 5 minutes, you already know you're watching something that on paper seems familiar, but an execution is going to be a little bit different. The film is pretty outstanding from a technical standpoint. Fantastic wide shots, both indoors and outdoors. Very good use of color. Very vibrant. I like horror films that are colorful a lot of the time. And yeah, this is vibrant. A lot of mix of blue and pink, actually. Editing is really impressive. Not quite as aggressive as The World of Kaneko was, but just as impactful. The story is actually very interesting as well. It's a bit unpredictable. It is. When you're watching the opening 20 minutes, you have a feeling of where it's going to go, and it doesn't quite go there. Or maybe it goes there faster than you might expect. One of the themes in this film seems to be weak romantic relationships that lack a strong foundation. So and you couple that with a satirical play on social media. And if you go in with that kind of mentality, you can see a lot of stuff in this. There's a lot of stuff going on here. Interesting stuff. Now, Sumabuki's character, like early on, for example, is so outgoing with his social media postings of his family. It's almost as if he's attempting to convince himself that he's happier than he actually is. And almost, you know, it's really interesting play on the characters here. The horror is a combination of intense, violent, and interesting. You know, I'm a big fan of combining supernatural horror and bloody violence. Most of the time, filmmakers separate them, but I like it when they're mixed together. So it's the supernatural entity in this likes to tear people up pretty good, so that's good. It also showcases one of the most elaborate and excessive exorcism sequences I've seen in a Japanese horror movie. In terms of flaws or whatever, I mean, there's not much, obviously, if I'm rating it this high. The runtime is over 2 hours, and I don't even mind. It's so good, it feels shorter to me. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of this movie. It Comes is my favorite of the year for Asian horror. And unfortunately, the availability on this one is pretty terrible. I couldn't find a stream for it anywhere. But I bought the Region 2 DVD without subtitles. You may be able to find it on the down low. or download, I guess you could say. So any chance you have to watch this, and there's maybe some streaming sites out there that have it too that aren't perfectly legitimate, just find a way to watch this movie, because it's worth watching. That's it. Those are my top 10 favorite Asian horror films from 2018. Japan took the top spots. Very common for this playlist, but that's how I feel for this year. I feel like the movies from this year were more top-heavy than usual. The last few parts I was giving a lot of positives and negatives to most of the films, but this top 10 I think is pretty solid. Even if the weakest films in this list, maybe Aurora is probably a controversial choice for a top 10 from this year, but everything else, the other 9 films I think are slam dunks for most fans of Asian horror, so you can have a field day with this top 10. And yeah, and remember, I have a ton of recommendations on this playlist. This playlist has 90 videos if you need catching up to do on Asian horror going back, decades. But not sure I'm quite ready to tackle 2019 yet. I'm close. I want to see if there's a few other movies I can find from that year. But I plan on uploading some addendum videos over the next few months, so look out for those. And as always, I'll see you next time.